I didn't know I stopped.
You had to.
Okay. Yeah, bring that in. That'd be fine. I'll do that. Okay. Oh yeah. See, that was a good thing. So now I need to go back here and I need to adjust that. I just simply need to put what it is. Okay. So in this case, I just write it in here and check on it. Right? So I could put the antecedent too, is that it's so obvious. You can do it again.
Obvious to you.
Yeah.
And that's your notes, so I guess it's okay.
True, yeah. So if I would put it in, I would put it in right where it's at, right here. Okay, hipfield imperfect. Okay, so now I'm not going to do anything with the hipfield. Nothing to say about that. It's going to come out in translation. Whatever it means is going to come out in translation. Imperfect, I always got to deal with. The imperfect in some way, right? First common singular, only dealing with that. Okay. I interpret it in this instance as future. Okay. It's a futuristic imperfect. Now, there's other options. It could be past, present, future. It sounds like time, right? I mean, time has context issues. Right? So, in this case, they took it in a futuristic sense. Okay? So they're going to have to translate that way. Right? So you're going to, the syntax is, you're going to get. Then again, personal pronoun, got an accusative, it's all attached to the end of a verb, so it's going to be an accusative here. And direct object. Okay? And I forgot something else. I'm forgetting a lot of things. What is it? Who is it? Yeah, see, I forgot my answer. It's good to always try to do everything, even though you know what it is. I mean, what's the big? It's just a matter of getting in a habit, because sometimes you're going to get to that point and you say, now this is the question. Who is the antecedent? What is the antecedent to this? You see? Forces you to make that as you get in the habit of doing everything you're supposed to do all the time. Okay? So, anyway, now here we got another word. We got cal, of course, cohortative in this instance. Okay? Now, the form doesn't show much. In other words, cohortative form is the same as imperfect form in the cal here. Okay? So that's an issue of parsing that needed to be dealt with first off. So you got cohortative, first common singular. So what kind? What is the implication of that? Cohortative, well, I took it as a result. And as a result, I make you personal pronoun at the end. And I forgot. The antecedent. Do the lazy route. And about result, well, the defining the has to coordinate with the cohortative. You couldn't hardly get it. It's going to introduce some kind of clause. The cohortative is going to be a result clause. The clause got to introduce it, right? So it can't be two different things. Okay. Then we got a preposition. In this case, we've got a indefinite. Notice the word put indefinite in here, as opposed to a definite noun. In other words, seems significant. Okay, that the noun itself doesn't have an article. Okay. And therefore, I just put it down there, indefinite. Preposition product turns something into something. Great nation, attributive adjective, no big drill on that, struggle on that. PL, now here's a PL, coordinative. Okay. That's going to coordinate again. Same problem as parsing. Same problem there. Oh. Looking at new verbiage. Okay. But it's going to coordinate with the preceding one. See? So you have to have, if it's not going to coordinate, then there's got to be some data somewhere along the line that's going to tell you that you can justifiably see this as using a different kind of clause. Okay? So we've got then a personal pronoun, and see the name is done. Name of God. Okay, result. Here's another coordinative here. First result, God, result. Okay. In this case, doesn't have pronoun in it. Here we got a direct object. Then this is the interesting word here. Okay. Cal imperative. Maybe that never bothered you. I don't know. Because it really translates simply, if you didn't understand this, as a simple imperative as command. You're not going to translate it like I got it here. You translate it as, and be a blessing. Okay? Right? Well, there's a whole issue involved with this whole thing here. Matter of fact, here's the GKC that's Exegesis grammar. Imperative and logical dependence upon preceding imperative, adjustable, or correlative, or an interrogative sentence serves to express a distinct assurance or promise that an action is stable and ensue as a certain consequence of previous action. It's a wrong thing to say. Consequence. Imperative, when depending upon adjunctive or an interrogative, frequently expresses a consequence which is expected with certainty, and often a consequence which is intended or in fact an intention. Okay, says a lot. Other than to say is coordinating with coordinatives in a resultative or consequential sense. So you didn't translate it simply as a pure command. Get with it, but you will be. That is, it translates out differently. Now you'll notice this is in this issue that this Chisholm here, who wrote this book here, but it's not in here. But he's got this whole article unpacking God's promise to Abraham, some linguistic considerations. Talks about all the structure, but then he talks about, you see, this whole issue here. There's an option, here's an imperative, promises, okay, goes through that option. Then option B, imperative, contingent promises, that option. And he gives you grammatical issues as to how he thinks it works. Option C, imperative, contingent promises, consequence. Now that turns out to be a little different. And additional promises, right? Okay, so there's a third option. And there's a fourth interpretive possibility. Imperative, promises, consequence, additional promises, etc., etc. See, I mean, this whole thing has 4 different ways in which you could go, right, on this thing. And using the grammatical stuff, when you're following through on the grammatical stuff, which then he notices and he gives some illustrations of where we've seen this imperative of communicating consequence, the idea that we have to say. He gives some examples from the text, from the Genesis where that occurs, a few examples there. And finally, he comes to this conclusion, outside Genesis. So the evidence favors B or C, which is similar to what we're going to take out. Understand coordinatives as expressing promises that are contingent upon obedience to the first imperative. Okay. So while they usually express logical consequences when they're coordinated with prayers. This is not always the case, and he was in that aspect of the whole thing. Bottom line is basically trying to figure out that problem of how come this imperative occurs and how do you sequence all these things that occur here. So it's a big grammatical discussion and issue. And I'm just pointing out the fact that if you didn't go through all the parsing, you could potentially just get confused as to how are you supposed to understand this rather significant passage, right? Okay, so that became a big discussion issue, okay? Which wouldn't have occurred if I didn't do all the analysis. Verse 3, this verse is chiastic. Okay? I won't get into that. But simply that came as a process of looking at or just noticing in the commentary and then evaluating and see if it looked like that to me too, you see. So I put that in there, okay? Let's see, anything else? Oh, here's a nifel. Okay, now you got a nifel here. Okay, nifel perfect. So you need to deal with both the nifel and the perfect first. So there we took that as future, which coordinates with the preceding ones. Then, where's the nifel? Rob consecutive. Oh, here's the nifel. Passive nifel as opposed to tolerant of one of those other options, you see. So I had to deal with the nifel as well. Okay. Now here's a word here that you say, I know what that is. That's an adjective meaning all. I mean, all men, all people, all this, all that. That's an adjective, right? Not in Hebrew. It's a noun. It's a noun. So it's a substantive. You'll see that in all grammar. So you got to deal with it as a substantive. At any rate, that's an example, one example, at any rate, of what analysis looks like. Okay. We won't go through all of this. I'll just show you an example. The Psalms, as well as some other point, I have a chance to look at. Same thing. Going through all the details. Okay. Hopefully we didn't miss anything. Oh, you'll notice here, yeah, see, this is one of those times when I guess was abbreviating things. That P could stand for more than one thing, so, it probably spelled out, Okay, so there's a lot of abbreviations in there that will change when I review it someday. Okay. Even models down there with parentheses and plus sign and stuff. That was confusing after a while. So that will change, but the analysis is staying. And there's a whole book. See a whole book? Yeah, there's only one chapter, so. Okay. A lot of work on it. I like that book. But same thing again. See, into all the pieces. Some things are bringing out issues by doing this that you wouldn't bring out if you didn't do this. This is a screwed up word.
I was going to ask.
Actually, what happened there was he went through and did a universal change, and so you got to be careful on what universe you want to change. That's all. So this is how this works in my diagramming, coordinating with it here, down through the whole book. Actually, this is much more extensive than that's the poetry stuff. So, but again, it starts with the syntactical analysis. You see, right? Okay, and we won't do it. We'll work on this tomorrow. If I'm too tired to work on this tonight. And you're saying, oh, wonderful, I'm glad he's done it. But here's the text, Psalm 1. We'll work that out tomorrow, okay? Okay? And then when we do diagrams, when we get going on that, we'll explore that diagram into it. Okay? So we'll be working on that tomorrow. I think that's what I said we were going to do anyway. Okay, any questions about... let's see, it's only 9:30, let's see, it's 10:30, it's about an hour past my bedtime, normal day. I wouldn't get up at 3 in the morning normally either, so I'm about had it, I'm afraid. But any comments or questions? We can cut this off now. Disappointment and frustration, maybe some degree of anger that's come about, could easily happen. And we don't know exactly how to pray. We know that your Spirit will, of course, give them the comfort and encouragement that they need. And we know that the Spirit will be with the family members, and they'll all flock around and be supportive. And we thank you for that. We want to be supportive ourselves. So we just continue to pray for them because it's beyond our comprehension, at least mine. Probably all of us here, and just pray that work through this in a way that maintains their relationships with everybody, but also with you, and pray that will even strengthen somehow. And we just ask for your blessing upon it. Now we pray as we continue our session here that you will be with us and help us to accomplish what we need to do. And we just pray that it will be a good one for us. Okay. Well, we shall begin with 2 eager readers.
That's one thing, we're doing the diagramming today, and that's the thing I know the least about.
Yeah, we'll do that. Hopefully you'll gain some confidence in that. First thing we want to do, here's what I want to do. I want to look at this textbook a little bit. Then we want to have you translate passages that we have you work with. And then we'll do terminology diagrams and see how far we get on that.
This one?
Yeah. No. Hey, what? I brought my wrong book. Their colors are the same. What?
You can use that.
That's the wrong book. You got one.
Yeah, we brought ours from home.
All my books today, but grab the wrong one. Well, we're going to start at 19 and just get some things. We don't need to spend a lot of time on it because what's involved in this first chapter is textual criticism, which we don't even know if we're going to get to tonight. So it's good just to touch bases on these, but then it'll be an opportunity later probably to reflect back when we're really into the textual criticism stuff, for instance, in here, and then it'll be in word studies in the next chapter, which we'll get to at a later time. Okay. So basically, the importance, of course, of textual criticism, we already mentioned that is, before you can exegete the text, you got to know what the text is. Okay? Right? It's pretty obvious. And I mentioned yesterday, textual criticism, this Bible, that is the Old Testament part, is one manuscript. Okay? And we showed you that some of the passages, that is, some of the books, have more textual problems, transcription-wise, than other books. For instance, the Pentateuch is very good, Joshua is pretty good, Psalms is pretty good, Isaiah is pretty good, Samuel, for instance, has good problems, Daniel has some problems, etc., etc.
and therefore maybe in some ways the Septuagint, which we'll talk about when we do it, see how that helps us out in some of those areas. Okay. So, textual criticism is a little stranger if you're familiar with the doing it in the New Testament. It's stranger than to doing it in the Old than it is sometimes in the New. Okay. Because on one hand, there's less data. On the other hand, there's more data. That's what sounds strange. Less data in the sense of a whole bunch of manuscripts to work with. More data in the sense in which the
More things to consider
about
the data you have.
Yeah, right. There's quite a number of things to think through. You got to do more with internal stuff, perhaps, because you don't have the external to balance it off with. Okay. And so I'll go into that at a later time. Okay. You'll notice on this, on surveying page 20, for instance, the 3 points that it gives here. And we'll, of course, go beyond 3 points when we do it ourselves, but you don't make these decisions, number one, solely on the basis of external evidence or manuscripts. Okay? Most of the time, we don't even know. As far as the Hebrew manuscripts, we don't even know which ones they are. Because our data will just say multiple manuscripts. Well, that's helpful. So we can't evaluate those manuscripts themselves. So you got to use internal and external ideas there, of course. So sometimes on the internal. Okay? And then number 2, you don't base your decisions on internal factors. Notice what he said, primarily on internal factors. Right? Well, we're going to do both ourselves, but he puts a heavy emphasis upon that. And the key we're going to see when we do it is that second. A key item in the internal evaluation is that second sentence. The preferred reading is one that best explains the existence of others. And we'll work on that pretty heavily. Okay. Of course, the frustration is the third paragraph. There are no hard and fast rules. Mm-hmm. So you're it's a subjective thing to some degree, you see. More difficult reading is a good example. Well, to one person, the more difficult reading would be one. Somebody else, it would be another. Little subjectivity involved there. Finally, in the Old Testament, it occurs more than in the New. You've got emendations or conjectures. Okay? So you have to make a guess. And sometimes the reason for that is because, frankly, we don't have enough evidence to make a solid decision. So you have to guess. Okay? Based on context and other kind of things. I mean, it's not just flipping a coin type guessing, but to some degree that has to happen. But it doesn't happen as much as some of the New Testaments or Old Testaments that we have done. For instance, I talked about the Old RSV. There's a lot of conjecture in the Old RSV. A lot of opinions that become part of the text, when in fact it doesn't have to be done half as much as it is. Okay. So then, of course, there's one of the examples that we read here. We don't need to give examples. Textual criticism. Words. This is, of course, an important thing on chapter number 4. Okay. We'll get into the word studies, but the basic idea, we want to touch upon a number of things just here, and it'll come up in different contexts, both in word studies and it'll come up in figurative language and maybe perhaps some other venues. But in this language we have a different set of words. Words, well, of course, different words than in the New Testament. What I mean is, based on a different language, a different approach to the word studies in the Old Testament than we do sometimes in the New. A couple of reasons for that. One is just the nature of the language, as I said. Triliteral, expand meaning, all that stuff. Which really poses an interesting thing because you can get, quite often, you get double meanings, intentional double meanings. It's easy to do when you got same spelling, the same sound, but two different concepts. One place that I bumped it, that I know of, where you've got triple entendre, not double entendre. It's in the book of Old Diet. And it's pretty clear as you exegete the book that all three are meant. Okay? All three.
You know what I asked?
Yeah. And maybe we'll have a chance to look at that at some point. So you have in page 33 just that heading. It says basic meaning. Okay, that's fine. That's pretty, where we're going to go for that kind of stuff. Multiple reference, which means, of course, that it means that you have quite a few meanings to the term. You got to determine, which one is here. And then polysemitism, which means that it has different, they're the same spelling, same sound, but different. That's completely different meaning. Okay. Those kind of things. Okay. So on there's the definition right on the bottom of page 34. One can see an example. Many words are polysemantic, display several distinct nuances. So that's, you'll find out that. Another aspect is problematic in this and word studies. This language is the fact that it's such an ancient language. So that if you look PDB, the dictionary, sometimes you'll see a word, you look it up, and maybe used 2 times, and it's questionable as to the meaning of the word in itself. But only used a couple of times, and maybe you find, well, there's an Akkadian word that seems to relate, or an Arabic word, but how much dependence do you put on those things to try and come up with the meanings of words?
There's not a lot of extra biblical literature.
Part of the reason is the ancient language and the fact that you have so little literature written in it at those times. Remember, we talked about history, right? 1400 or so BC, 400 BC. There's a big time frame, And if we had not only Bible but other literature written in else with that same context of time, with the same words, the same culture, then you got stuff to work with. Other than that. And a lot of the reasons for that is because when one nation defeats another nation, it just burns everything, and if their libraries and everything else, they go up in smoke, right? So you have to lose an awful lot of stuff. So we have a little bit of a problem there in that respect.
Was it in this chapter too that they talked about how, because of the long time frame between when the books were written, that words even change throughout that 1,000 years?
They do, and that's one of the dangers when we're talking about semantic sins to avoid. That's one of those is at a particular point in time. Let's say in the 430 time of Malachi, a particular word was used by, let's say, Moses in 1440 or something, right? Well, in that 1,000 years or so, the word has migrated in its meaning. Some meanings drop off, some are added. By the time you get to 430, right, you might be checking your dictionary and find, it meant such and such. Well, yeah, it did 1,000 years before, but it doesn't mean that in 430. So one of the problems is you drag all those meanings unjustifiably into a different time frame. We have that in our language, the typical example is suffer the little children. Right, beat them with sticks, make them suffer. That's not what it means. So anyway, and here's another problem, another error that he mentions that's so typical in preaching sometimes, and that's the second one on page 38. Don't assume there's a concrete word picture behind every word or phrase, right? Boy, they will, they find a particular word that's find it be some allusion to some concepts in Arabic or something, and all of a sudden, boom, there it is in my sermon, in a sermon, and sometimes it's just completely off, It makes good preaching, maybe. I mean, it sounds good, but it really isn't very good because it's not true to the word. What we just talked about is number 3 in the book on 39. Don't overextend this class specialized meaning, I have to say. Sometimes you get not only different time frames, but in a different context. So if it's in a legal context, a word means one thing, but it doesn't mean that in another context. Isaiah 1:18 is a perfect example. I don't know if you read it. Isaiah 1:18 is constantly misused because it's not put in proper context. Come on and let us, here's how the translation is going, let us reason together, right, says the Lord, right? And so what that means in a lot of preaching and teaching is, well, let's just get together and talk this over and you'll come to a proper conclusion. That is not what it's talking about at all. Okay? This is a call of God to enter into a legal proceeding. Present your case. Come on, I'll present mine, you present yours. We're in court. This is the whole first chapter of Isaiah is a court scene. They're in court. There's a judge, there's a defendant, there's a prosecutor, and this whole thing is a court scene. And that verse right there, that concept right there, is in a legal context, doesn't mean just let's think it through. It says present your case. Okay? And I'll present mine and we'll see who's got the truth. So there's a lot of mistakes that occur just by not contextualizing it. So it specializes there. The meaning is pretty specialized in that context. It's a lawsuit context. And in that same word in another context would not necessarily mean that. Okay? So, anyway, there's a lot of illustrations he gives there as well. And I'm not going to go into all this usage survey here. We'll get some of that when we get to word studies itself. Okay, so I want to go to some of the other things that he just simply mentions on 49. We talk about words that play. There's an awful lot of playful use of words in Hebrew. And that's one of the reasons why I really like it. Like Hebrew, because they understand the nature of their language and they, in fact, capitalize upon it. Okay, we'll show some good examples of that, I'm sure. Repetition is one example that sometimes appears pretty good in English. Other times it doesn't appear in English. Okay? The example of that is from the third chapter of right at the beginning of Genesis. I haven't read that far. You've read Genesis. How far do you read it?
I think we got out of the second chapter.
You got out of the second chapter. Well, anyway, I just want to say. Huh?
We will today.
I want to touch on the verse 24 of chapter 2. This is in the, after Adam gave his wonderful song there and woke up and found himself married there. In verse 25, it says, and both of them were naked, the man and his wife, and they were not ashamed. Right? If you look at the word naked, arum, see that? Okay. Now look at the first verse in chapter 3. Now the snake was more cunning. Arum. See that? Okay. More cunning. than any beast of the field, etc. And part of it, and then of course is the the fall of man here. And part of the issue involved in the fall of man was the fact that, look at verse 7. After they had sinned, the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were, what? Naked. Right? See what I'm saying? They, they put these figures together, etc. So, but the English will not reflect the fact that you've got the same word. There's other words you could have used. See, so it's designed to use that, and maybe by implication it is this. Maybe by implication, maybe one of the main tricks, if we want to call that, of Satan. Okay, one of his cunning things is to use this whole concept of sexuality in the sin arena. And who can doubt that that is a big seller today out there in the sin arena, but those are the kind of things that occur very frequently in this language. Therefore, to be able to read it in the language, open your eyes to a lot of things. Then there's sound play. You notice is that. There's words that sound the same. In fact, not only sound the same, but exactly spelled the same way. Okay? And I've got some examples. We'll see it another time, I'm sure, in the book there. A few of them I point out. But that being the case, you got same sound. Well, let me give you another example. But in the book of Numbers, there is a song in the book of Numbers 30. It's 33. I don't have another Bible. I have everything marked up here. No, it's not 33. Let's see where it is. Oh yeah, 21. 21 verse 17 and 18. And, for instance, 19. But 17 and 18. Actually, it starts at the very end of verse 16. God, they want to, and from there, to Beersheba, they went to Beersheba, verse 16, where the Lord said to Moses, gather the people together so that I may give them water. That's what it says in verse 16. Notice the phrase that I may give, that's the first word in the right-hand column, right by the 17. So I may give them water. Note that word. Okay, from Naphon. Then Israel sung this song, spring up, O well, sing to it, right? Okay. The well that the princes dug, the leaders of the people dug, in other words, with scepter and with their staves, their sticks. And then from the wilderness, it went to Montanah. Now notice that last word at the end of the poem, Montanah. It's based on the same word as Naphon or Etzanah there. Okay? But that word Montanah is a place name, the place, but it's also something else. It's also the same word for the word gift, based upon Naphon, the gift, right? Constantly throughout this wilderness wanderings, God promises to give them the promised land, right? And here, we're going to have time to go through the whole thing, but the word itself uses a place name. When they're leaving their oasis, if you will, to go back out into the dry desert, okay? The very name of the place that's next on the itinerary, is a place that emphasizes the fact that God has promised to give them the promised land, and that's where they're going. Now, I only mention that because in the English translations of this passage, lo and behold, they cut the poem off at the end of their word staves, and they take the last phrase, and from the wilderness, they went to Maranatha, from Maranatha, not Yale, we see the part of the poem. That is the punchline for the poem. That is the key to the whole poem. Okay? But based again on the sound, based on the concept of double entendre, there's a strong sound picture in another song in Exodus chapter 32, verse 18. And if you don't see this, then you might as well just cut the song away, out, throw it away because it doesn't have any meaning. Okay? In verse 18, it's on page 141. I think you got the same, I don't know. So, you said, this is not the sound, this is Moses coming down the mountain, meets Joshua, and Josh says, there's a problem down in the camp down here, right? He made a lot of noise. He said, well, this isn't the sound of the response to warfare here, or victory in war, if you like. It's not the sound in response to, defeat in war here. This is a sound of, and the translations will say, singing. Okay. Notice the word anot, first line. Anot, second line. Anot, third line. The only difference is what? Got a dagesh in there. The sound isn't going to be different at all. Okay? The sound is exactly the same, but it's a different word. And not only that, that particular word does mean singing, but the same spelling and the same sound also means oppression. You see what I'm saying? And when you look through that whole business here, everything that was going on, and what this song is saying, what Moses is saying here, then you get to a completely different interpretation of this whole thing. In fact, apart from that, you don't have any interpretation that makes this very significant. Okay? So anyway, this kind of thing occurs not infrequently. Double entendre, of course there's triple entendre too. In that one place that I know of. Okay. And another one, well, there's a lot of entendre now, but other things to do. Okay, verbal illusions he talks about, where you've got a use of a word that implies something else, not necessarily related to sound or spelling, but it implies something else. And that's a lot of times in a poetic, using a poetic thing, or you have autonomy, for instance, or personification or something like that. Okay. That occurs an awful lot. And of course, he's talking a lot about the syntax in this section, which we'll get to later on. You'll really fine.
I was just curious about how the Septuagint translated that. Mm-hmm. It just translated the exact thing, exar, contone. All three of those words.
Oh, translate all three the same?
Yeah.
Yeah, see, that can't work. Okay, can't work. Okay. Anyway, that'll have a chance to reflect on some of those ideas when we get into word studies and textual criticism. So I'll be enough of that. Should go on all day with illustrations, but I guess we can't. Okay. Well, let's give you some opportunity to translate for me. I'm not so hard. I don't want to hear you translate. Let's hear you translate Genesis 12. First 3 verses. All right.
12:1.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, here goes. How do you like us to pronounce the Tetragrammaton?
Pronounce it? Well, I've come with a vowel, these, but you don't even have to. You don't have to pronounce the Hebrew. Just go ahead and give me the translation.
How do you like us to translate it?
Yeah.
I guess that was my question.
Yeah.
So we want to just go with Lord?
Yeah. Oh, that's. Or you can say Yahweh.
Okay.
If you want to say Lord, make it in all capital letters.
I will. And the Lord said to Abram, go. Yeah, you go. How do you translate that? That concept there,
Of course, it's pretty idiomatic. Go is the first word. With respect to you, so it's an emphasis upon you. We would in English, we can say something like, get yourself to.
Okay. Okay, so get going. You get going. Get your to or from your land and from your people and from the house of your father to the land which I will show you.
Okay, verse 2. Yeah.
All right. I will make you a great people, a nation, and I will bless you, and make your name great.
Right.
And they will be a blessing.
Okay. So, imperative, as we talked about yesterday, is kind of consequential. As a result, it's consequential. Okay, verse 3.
Your turn? My turn.
And I will bless those who bless you, and those who curse you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. That was
Good.
okay. Well,
It's like you're reading English.
huh?
It's like you're reading English sometimes.
Yeah.
Actually, you reading that probably better than I read English.
Okay, I tell you what, let's look at the song. Get that down. We're going to work that song out here. Momentarily. Okay.
All right. Blessed is the man which does not walk in the advice of the wicked, and does not stand in the way of the sinners, and what was does not say. In the seat of the evildoers.
Okay. Typically translated as scorners.
Scorners. I'm not very typical. I'm not typical, which is a problem.
Okay, verse 2.
Okay. But for something like that.
Yeah, the two first words there come out in the verse.
On the law of the Lord, or in the law of the Lord, He takes pleasure,
Okay.
and on His law, when I looked this one up, it said moaned, and what were the other two?
Mumble,
That's
meditate,
usually
translate, meditate. It's the idea of a person sitting over there talking to themselves
day and night.
and verse 3, he will be like a tree planted by the water courses, which its fruit produces in its time, and its leaf will not wither, and everything he does prospers. 4.
Low king. Is that therefore or
Literally, not so.
not so? Oh yeah.
I mean, yes, literally, but we might use another word in English to get the idea.
So, but not the wicked. Or here's another key theme. Is that best translated? But
Well, yeah, right. Just like above. But you didn't do the Arashahim, did you?
isn't that the wicked?
Oh, yeah, right.
But not the wicked. Well, not so the wicked, but is that shaft?
Yeah.
So basically, they're going to be blown away like the chaff.
Yeah, right. But more literally, it's
Which I forgot. Tid.
not allowing to drive away, blow away his mind. Ruach.
That's wind.
Wind
Driven by the wind.
drives away.
Which, oh yeah, foolish.
Which drives it away is a pronoun.
Okay.
5.
Okay. Is that therefore?
Yeah, that's together.
The wicked will not who is to rise up or come up in judgment, Oh, the assembly, right?
Assembly, congregation, of the righteous. If Yahweh knows the way or lifestyle, you need to say of the righteous, but the lifestyle or way of sinners perishes. Okay. Well, there's a number of things that we want to find out about this. Now, it would be helpful probably to keep in mind what we do when we're going to do the tedium stuff first. And then keep this section on term analysis open where the particular kind of word you do such and such a thing, right? Okay. So that's what we want to do here first. On my file first here. Let's see what it's okay.
What do you use to put the Hebrew words in there? Do you just take one at a time?
No, just read the whole thing in. Okay. We'll show you how to do it in case you don't know how.
And then you just enter after each one of them? You just...
No, the easier way. In fact, Adam was the one who showed me the easier way.
He would. He's the guy that, in our first Greek class, he helped show me how to diagram. So we diagram most of it all together. You know. We work together for that.
Okay, let me go with Psalm 1. Okay, now of course I'll just copy it. So here's how it starts with here. Okay, so right there. Okay. Now, file. Okay, put it in here. And I'm going to put down the same formatting text. Now, that's off the page. A little smaller here. Let's see what we're doing. And I'm just going to highlight all of this. Okay. And I'm going to go here and go to replace. Replace space with a paragraph mark. Paragraph mark on the spot. Make sure that space with here. Paragraph mark. Okay. Now I'm also going to put this, and we'll see what I do in this in a minute. I'm also going to take on this one, this bottom one, I'm also going to put a space. And then I'm going to change the font. So I'll do that in there. Font rather than 12 points. Okay. Now replace it all. Okay. Now here it is. I'll put it over on the other side. Okay. So there's the whole thing. Okay. With a couple of exceptions where they have these here. So then it just drops it down. It's not a problem. Now, the reason why I put the on this side of the word, I put the new time rolling there is because when I do my analysis stuff, it's going to be put it in tab someplace. For some reason then it'll be, so I don't have to keep changing my font when I move over from Hebrew into English. That's it. I'll show it. So I got set up that way. And this one here, see, after everyone, it's the time wrong. Just tab it over. This is where I'm going to start putting my data in there. Okay. Let me do one other thing for you. Show you one other thing about this. For your pleasure. When I double click on this, this tells me what it is, right? Suppose it's going to say it's a particle of interjection. Well, let me double click on that. It says this is an adjective, gentilic. Adjective. It's not a particle or an interjection. It's not an adjective either. Okay? It really took me to the wrong word. Okay? So, I mean, you gotta keep your mind working on some of this stuff. Okay? Here is the word right here. It's from this word. Right? And it happens to be what? It happens to be a noun, a masculine noun. Okay? So just a little word of the wise there that don't believe everything you read. Okay. All right. Okay. Anyway, let's just leave. Let's see. Put stuff here. Okay. In case we want to look at it. Check something out. In case we want to do that. Okay. Here's what I want to do now. I want to take some time and see if we can properly analyze this stuff.
You just came unplugged.
Okay. So you. What's happening? Go away. Okay, now, we already know what this is, right? So, I'm going to put down as a noun, okay? But it also is what? Well, it's masculine nominative plural, but it's construct, okay? Okay. Now, what, with all this data here, what is it I need to analyze? I'm just going to read it.
The type of noun.
What?
The type of nominative, or the type of noun, or...
Well, there's only one type of noun, I think. Well, there's two. I suppose you could say a concrete or abstract, but that's not a flagrant. That couldn't come out in the translation. So, but the issue you deal with nouns is primarily what? Case, right? So we really want to work with the nominative here. Okay, so then what kind of nominative? You got a couple options, 4 options or so, right? Okay. Of course, you translate it out as the blessedness is plural of the man. That's not a whole clause, a sentence, right? So you've got maybe a couple options here. Actually, I'm going to put up my syntax book for that. No, it's not. Now, the nominative basically got subject, predicate, vocative, absolute. Nominative, absolute. On the one hand, it's often translated out. Oh, the blessedness is of. That almost sounds like vocative, except it's not really addressing anybody in particular. But it could work. Or nominative absolute, meaning it's a nominative, but it's in a clause that's not complete. Okay. So either one of those translated in this instance. Okay. It's translated as a nominative absolute, but elliptical, but putting in the idea would be what? The man who, and then all that other stuff, is or will be blessed. Let's just put in this case, vocative, just so we can work with it, and then see everything? Okay. Now this stage is all I would want to do with that. Okay. Okay. Now what's involved with this next word? What is it?
Another noun.
It's another noun. Okay.
Masculine plural, but is it on?
All nouns following a construct
or genitive. Oh, yeah.
Okay. So it would be genitive singular. Right? And so that being the case, well, it's a noun, so the primary thing we need to deal with would be the case again, right? Mm-hmm. So the question then is, well, what kind of a genitive? The blessedness is of the man. That's how we translated it. What is it, though? More specifically, it's not subject, it's not means, I'm going to write this, it's not purpose. Description, well, that probably wouldn't work either. Possession, would that work? Belonging to the man, the blessedness is owned by, possessed by the man who, well, that could work. It's a possibility, it's not a relationship, certainly not part of it, that is part. Man being a whole other than some part is taken. It's not an object result. Advantage, blessedness is in the interest of or for the benefit of the man. Now that would work. Species, material, measure, apposition, reference. Reference would work a lot of times, but it's a non-player probably in a sense. So possession or advantage, probably the concept of advantage works in this kind of context. So then I would simply write advantage. Okay. Then there's something else. What else is there here?
It's the article?
Yeah, right. See, there's an article. Okay. Okay. And then articles have functions we need to deal with. Here's my list. Definiteness. That's just my terminology. I'm not sure what this terminology stuff is. Definiteness is your default, if you will. Okay. If none of these others, which are more narrower in focus, work, then it's definite, of course. The question is there anything narrower in focus? Distinctive means you're speaking about a particular, a definite entity, but a particular well-known one. Is that our context? Probably not. Previous record, well, not in this context. Possession, no. That ain't going to work. Okay. Species, well, man is a species. That's a possibility, right? Okay. Demonstrative, that man, well, that's another potential possibility. Probably doesn't say much more than what definiteness says. Certainly not vocative or relative to superlative. So we've got, species, right? Or we've got definiteness. That's our options, it seems to be here, right? Maybe part of the solution to this, and there's a question that initially is raised right now. And this is an exegetical question that's coming to mind. What question is raised? In my mind, do you think, before I conclude all of this?
talking about the article itself?
Not necessarily, but the whole phrase. The will translates out literally the man. Because the article is attached to the noun, right? Any question comes to your mind at all?
Maybe how else man might be understood.
Why would that be significant, potentially?
Well, if it's mankind or man.
Okay, or put it another way. Don't this also apply to women?
Yeah.
You know, so the question is, part of the question that could arise would be, well, can the word ish refer to people, mankind? You know what I'm saying? As opposed to just maleness, right? And so that's the issue where you would make potentially so you want to investigate that. If man as opposed to women, that's probably not where we want to go here, right? No emphasis on the distinction there. Husband, probably not. Man, probably not. Man, the resident in or belonging to a place or people. That's more like mankind, isn't it? I mean, obviously the men of Israel includes women, right? So in that sense. So men equals retainers, followers, soldiers. So the question is, can that relate to women as well? Yes. Okay, does that have any bearing upon, and it probably does, I mean, obviously, it's not just the males who are going to be blessed here. Okay. So does that have any bearing upon how we would want to interpret the article?
If we're going to consider that it's speaking of mankind in general, we probably won't want to be too specific with the article, right, with the species. Saying, well, it's just a man instead of the general mankind. With that.
Now, if you went to definiteness, then you're talking about this thing that we translate out as the man. Okay. If you translate it as species, man is a species, then, right? Human species. Okay. So in that sense, to be able to include women there, it would seem that we're talking about this species which you're using the word ish for, right? And therefore that will at least justify my translation. Okay? And now I'm not going to call man a species. I'm not going to do that. Blessing this of, right? The person, let's say, the person, right? And that can include men and women at that point. Okay. So what is that? A share. It only occurs 4 or 5 times in every page. Well, typically, particle relation. Yeah, particle relation. In this case, well, syntax actually would be well here to relative, nominal, resultant, perfect, representative, causative, conditional. Right? It's functioning as a relative pronoun.
What would a conditional one look like?
Translated in conditional or a cause like although or if or something like that. So it's functioning as a relative. It's relating what it's doing. It's relating the subject of the following to this man, this person. So, what is it? Particle relation. Okay, what is this functioning as? Now you got to read the text. That's what the text talks to you. How is it functioning? we know what it stands for. It's going to stand for the man, so at some point we're going to put in C equals the person. Person, obviously, is easy. The laziness way. Okay. How is it, you translated it, how is it functioning? Who what?
Who's not law? So,
No.
I guess I don't know what you're asking.
Function of it's stating that if it's functioning as a relative pronoun. Okay. So it's taking the place of a noun. Forget the word ish, put the word, forget the word I shared, put the word man in there, okay? How does it translate using the word man instead of which?
Blessed is the man who is not. Or blessed is the man who.
The man does not walk. It's functioning now.
Substance?
The subject.
Oh, the subject.
Right. The subject, right? And we're going to translate it in relative fashion, so in this case, the person who. Okay. What part of speech would you take low to be? Well, it's an adverb. Negative adverb. But if you've got these little helpers down here, particle, negative, always a particle, it's not a noun or a verb or something. So it's a negative adverb. That's what I call it. And sometimes, most of the time, it'll negate a verb. That's typically what they do. But sometimes the negative will negate a noun. Usually it won't be this negative, but sometimes it does. So better negative. Negative adverb. Okay. And what else is there to do with it? Nothing. Now, if it was unclear as to what it modified, then you'd make a note of that effect, right? But it's not unclear. I mean, it's right next to the word modified. Okay, now here's the next one. What's that?
Cal perfect.
Oh, let's see. Do something. Cal perfect. What else?
3 MS.
Third masculine singular. Now, what is it with that we need to analyze?
Would it be what type of perfect?
Perfect. Right. The aspect there. So we want to do the perfect. So the question is what syntax for the perfect you want to use. I've got my list shows completed, simple, past, instantaneous, no being resolved, and then all these other ones. Now in the context, as you read it here, blessedness is of the man who did not walk, is not walking, will not walk. What do you think it's kind of relating to? It's kind of almost proverbial in a sense. So we're not probably not talking, he did not in the past do this. Right? We're probably talking about blessings in the present. Right? And that certainly is followed through when you read the context and let the context talk to you. Right? Because the next verse says what? But in the law of Yahweh is, you'd have to put in there, is his delight. No verb to put is there typically. And in his law, now we've got an imperfect. Meditates, ruminates, muttered, day and night. Will do this? No. It's the law of Yahweh is his delight. And he's doing it. Right? And so it's probably not past here. So what one of these would work? Well, of course, any time wouldn't be Completed, simple, fast, none of that would work. Instantaneous, no, that occurs, you know what I mean? But we're talking about a way of life, most likely. Okay?
It's kind of normal.
No equals. There's certain times when we'll do that. Resolves, imminent, epistolary, future, perfect, aggressive, calm, iterative would work. Stative, of course, it is an activity, so it really isn't a state of being, isn't it? Probably. Experiential. So you got probably a good 2 of them that would work, 3 of them maybe that would work. Future probably isn't the case, certainly not based on the next verbs. The past isn't the case, so we're in the present somewhere. So which of these can relate to the present? Well, the experiential can relate to the present. The stative, but then again, being an activity, I would call it a state of being, probably. So I would use that one. Iterative, that is. That would work in the context where you've got, he does not walk what? He does not walk in the counsel of wicked. Well, whenever the wicked counsels, he doesn't go that way. So iterative would work. See what I'm saying?
That's a repetition.
Repetition. But repetition would be whenever he gets a counsel from the wicked. He just decides to ignore it. That would work. Okay? So anyway, let me know when you need to cut this off. So anyway, for the time being, let's do it this way. How would you translate that to get an iterative idea across? And the walk is probably, do you think that is concrete or metaphorical? Probably metaphorical, right? So you don't need to use the word walk. Right? Although we got walk, stand, sit, concepts, so we probably don't want to get too far away from it. But understanding it metaphorical might be a good idea to make a note of that when we're going to get to the. I'll show you how I make notes on that stuff. But what would you say about this one? Iterative. How would you get that across?
See, I don't know if I go with iterative. I think it would be experiential.
Experiential.
That would help my interpretation be, walks or follows or whatever.
Okay, so
because to me it seems more as he's going through this, the issue is in the midst of this experience, how is he going to respond?
Simply walk there. Okay, now I was going to say, I would want to make a note to myself, perhaps. I would simply say metaphorical use of the word. Just simply make a note. There it comes. Okay. Okay, what do we have there? So what do we have with this?
We deal with the
outside your primary word.
we deal with that first.
Primary word is based upon your translation, the probability from the translation point of view is it's what? No. Right? Of course, if you're uncertain, you just simply have to look it up. That means so certain we don't bother here where it says noun. I'm not sure why they say noun, common, feminine. I don't know why I always use that word common here. I just like to use it. So anyway, this is a noun. Okay, feminine, what? Singular. Okay. What? Case what? I always use the same word in the first one, so.
Nominative or genitive or accusative. Those are options. Right?
Right. And all nouns attached to or following prepositions are genitive.
You have to base. You have to base.
Yeah, right. So genitive singular, okay? Then what we analyze, of course, since we've already done it twice before, we analyze the case, okay? But you don't analyze the case until you deal with the preposition, because this prepositional phrase has no idea. So the probabilities here is, okay, we just leave that go and deal with it, the preposition, all right? And so bait, the question on the preposition, you see. I usually open my preposition booklet, so I have all this stuff in front of me. Okay, so bait, there's one or two options there.
What were you saying?
Oh, here. Yeah. Locative, what is it? Counsel, right? So that's kind of a in the counsel. So the counsel, that's not a place. It's not time, probably. Not disadvantage, means or instrument, complement, agent, price, cause, accompaniment, explicative, specifying, auditive, condition, motion, distributed. Evening work?
Maybe. Does locative mean location?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Condition?
Condition, like if.
Oh.
Part of the problem, I'm sure, here is terminology. Your grammar book there probably has different terminology. But specifying is used in some grammars for the idea-like kind of reference. You see what I'm saying? Specification, specify, reference. How should make this the same? That would work. So the idea would be he does not walk in respect to or in reference to the counsel of the wicked, in relationship to, right? Or explicative, even meaning kind of like an explanation, if you will, but I don't know if I like that. So, if none of these work for you, if they don't sing, then what's your next option?
Give up, go home.
No.
Is this a test?
Then your next option is
Go computer hunting.
no. You go and look at prepositions from the dictionary perspective. Okay. So we have in. In a metaphorical sense, actually, you could say since walking is metaphorical, walking in the counsel, right? So you could use in, but you want to understand that it's not a place. Okay. So it's used.
Would be manner.
Too far. Where he's got here, for instance, somehow I lost my spot. There it is. No, that's not it. What happened? Where's Pines? I didn't know that. Figurative, see, properly may derive a figurative significance, right? So using the concept of figurative idea, with the figurative idea we translate in, okay? But what syntax would you call it? It's
Is there a genitive of manner?
a manner.
Because it's kind of in the manner of the devices.
I don't know, a manner, where's the last one?
What are you looking for?
Here it is. It's lost.
Conjunction.
Okay, so here,
Time up. Sorry.
No.
still